The immortal's hand was warmer than Avellini expected. She could feel it through the ceremonial white silk of her dress, not burning, not cold, just impossibly solid, like touching living stone. Rowan Nightshade's arm had settled around her waist with the casual authority of someone who'd stopped questioning his right to anything centuries ago. And now Avellini sat frozen on the Alpha King's lap while her entire world restructured itself around this singular act of lunacy. What have I done? The grand amphitheater had gone silent. 2,000 wolves stood motionless in their ceremonial whites, the joyful chaos of mate discovery suspended mid-embrace. Even the eternal moonlight streaming through the open ceiling seemed to pause, as if the moon goddess herself had stopped to witness this unprecedented blasphemy. Commander Lucas Thornridge stood at the base of the dais, his handsome face a mask of shock that would have been comical under different circumstances. Cedarwood and steel, his scent still called to something primitive in her wolf, the mate bond pulling like fish hooks under her skin. Her body wanted to go to him, to complete this sacred recognition, to fulfill the destiny the moon goddess had supposedly ordained. But Avellini's mind saw only Adrian's torn throat, his cooling body in the frost, that note hidden in the moonstone. The bonds are not fate. They can be manufactured. This is highly irregular, the high priestess stammered from her position near the altar. Mother Celeste was ancient even by wolf standards, her silver hair braided with moonstones, her ceremonial robes shimmering in the sacred light. She'd presided over 300 years of choosing ceremonies, and her expression suggested none of them had included a she-wolf committing casual treason. Your Majesty, the sacred bond has been recognized. The young woman must. Must what? Rowan's voice cut through the amphitheater like a blade through silk, quiet, precise, absolutely lethal. Please, Mother Celeste, educate me on what anyone in my kingdom must do. The high priestess paled. Even after 3 centuries, apparently no one forgot that the Eternal Sentinel had conquered this kingdom with blood and claw, that beneath the civilization and ceremony lived something that had torn apart armies and drunk from the throats of his enemies. Avellini felt that power now, contained in the body beneath her like lightning in a bottle. He wasn't even trying to intimidate anyone. This was just what he was, an apex predator wearing the costume of a king. The sanctuary claim is ancient law, Rowan continued conversationally, though his amber eyes never left Lucas's face. Any wolf may claim protection from the crown for sufficient cause. Miss Blackthorn has invoked that right. Do you challenge her claim, Commander? Lucas's jaw tightened. Up close, Avellini could see the calculation behind his eyes, the mind that had probably orchestrated her twin's murder working through angles and responses. He'd always been brilliant, Adrian's best friend, her father's most decorated warrior, the wolf everyone trusted with their lives. The perfect weapon. Your Majesty, Lucas said carefully, and his voice still had that warm timbre that had told her bedtime stories when she was 5. With respect, Avellini has just lost her twin brother. She's clearly not thinking straight. The mate bond is sacred, ordained by the moon goddess herself. To reject it is to reject divine will. Divine will, Rowan repeated, and something sharp entered his tone. How convenient that divine will aligns so perfectly with your desires, Commander. Tell me, how often does the moon goddess manufacture her sacred bonds these days? The amphitheater's silence deepened impossibly. Avellini's breath caught. He'd heard her. In those 3 seconds before his arms settled around her waist, the Alpha King had actually processed her desperate sanctuary claim and believed her. Or at least, was willing to entertain the possibility. Lucas's expression fractured for just a moment, something cold and calculating flashing behind the warm facade. Then he smoothed it over, the perfect soldier once more. I don't understand what you're implying, Your Majesty. Then allow me to clarify. Rowan shifted slightly, and Avellini suddenly became aware of how completely his presence dominated the space around them. She'd studied the Alpha King from a distance her entire life. Everyone had, the way you'd study a mountain or a star, something fundamental and unchanging. Up close, he was something else entirely. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and beneath the immaculate royal attire and controlled expression lived something wild that even 300 years of civilization hadn't quite tamed. Miss Blackthorn has claimed someone is manipulating the mate bonds for political purposes, Rowan said. Given that her twin brother recently died under suspicious circumstances after apparently discovering information about the Mooborn prophecy, and given that her supposedly divinely ordained mate happens to be the same commander who was the sole survivor of that rogue attack, I find her claim sufficiently compelling to warrant investigation. Do you disagree? The amphitheater erupted into chaos. Wolves shouted over each other, some defending Lucas's honor, others demanding answers. The royal guards moved to form a tighter perimeter around the dais. Several pack alphas began arguing about protocol and precedent, their voices rising above the din. Through it all, Avellini sat perfectly still on the Alpha King's lap, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd expected immediate arrest, execution maybe, certainly not this. Not the eternal sentinel himself taking her side, weaponizing her desperate accusation against one of his own commanders. "You're insane," she whispered, so quietly only Rowan could hear it over the chaos. "You don't even know if I'm telling the truth." His thumb traced an absent pattern against her hip, a small gesture that sent electricity down her spine. When he spoke, his voice was pitched for her ears alone, and it held something that might have been amusement. "I've had 300 years to become an excellent judge of desperation, little wolf. You're either telling the truth, or you're the best liar I've encountered since the Battle of Crimson Valley. Either way, you've made this evening significantly less boring than I anticipated." "I'm so glad my brother's murder and potential kingdom-destroying conspiracy entertain you," Avellini hissed. "Oh, I'm not entertained." The amusement vanished from his voice, replaced by something ancient and cold. "I'm interested. There's a difference. The last time someone tried to manipulate the sacred bonds, it ended with half the kingdom burning and my mate's death. If someone is foolish enough to attempt it again, I'd very much like to know who they are before I tear out their throat." Before Avellini could process that revelation, his mate had died from bond manipulation. Her father appeared at the base of the dais. Alpha Marcus Blackthorn looked like he'd aged a decade in the few minutes since the ceremony began. His silver-streaked hair was disheveled, his ceremonial robes askew, and his eyes held the particular horror of a father watching his daughter commit political suicide in real time. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled, "please forgive my daughter. She's been unwell since Adrian's death. Grief can cause wolves to act irrationally. If you release her to my custody, I swear on my pack's honor that You'll what?" Rowan interrupted. "Force her to complete a mate bond she's claiming is manufactured? How very paternal of you, Marcus. The bond is sacred. So everyone keeps telling me. Yet I notice none of you can explain how a bond supposedly ordained by divine will could be manufactured by mortal intervention. Unless you're suggesting the moon goddess herself is involved in whatever conspiracy Miss Blackthorn is alleging." Marcus's mouth opened and closed. The logical trap was perfect. Either admit the bonds could be manipulated, thus validating Avellini's claim, or accuse the moon goddess of conspiracy, which was its own form of heresy. "I have a proposal," Rowan announced, his voice cutting through the chaos once more. The amphitheater fell silent, 2,000 wolves waiting to hear what the immortal king would decree. "Miss Blackthorn will remain under my personal protection while her claims are investigated. During this time, Commander Thornridge will not approach her, speak to her, or attempt to invoke the mate bond in any capacity. If the investigation proves her accusations false, she'll face appropriate consequences for her actions tonight. If they prove true." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone in the amphitheater could imagine what an angry immortal would do to someone who'd manipulated the sacred bonds. "You can't be serious," Lucas said, and for the first time, his composure cracked completely. "Your Majesty, she's my mate. The bond we'll keep for a few weeks while we determine if it's genuine or manufactured." Rowan's tone suggested the conversation was over. "Unless you have some pressing reason to claim your mate immediately, Commander? Some urgent purpose that can't wait for verification." The trap snapped shut beautifully. If Lucas pushed too hard to claim Avellini immediately, he'd look guilty. If he agreed to wait, he'd lose access to whatever he'd needed the mate bond for in the first place. Lucas's hands clenched into fists. For just a moment, Avellini saw murder in his eyes, not the controlled violence of a soldier, but something rawer, more desperate. Then he lowered his head in a stiff bow. "As you command, Your Majesty." "Excellent." Rowan stood in one fluid motion, lifting Avellini with him as easily as if she weighed nothing. Her feet dangled off the ground for a heartbeat before he set her down, his hand remaining on the small of her back. "Mother Celeste, you'll begin investigating the methods by which mate bonds could theoretically be manipulated. I want a full report in 3 days. Alpha Marcus, Commander Thornridge, you're both dismissed. The choosing ceremony will reconvene tomorrow evening for those whose matches were interrupted." He turned to leave, his hand still guiding Avellini, and then paused. When he looked back at the assembled crowd, something predatory flickered in those amber eyes. "One more thing," Rowan said softly. "If any harm comes to Miss Blackthorne while she's under my protection, I'll consider it a personal attack on the crown. I trust everyone understands what that means." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then the Alpha King began walking, and Avellini had no choice but to follow, her hand somehow finding its way into his as they descended the dais together. Behind them, the grand amphitheater remained in shocked silence. "You realize," Avellini whispered as they crossed through the crowd that parted like water before them, "you've just declared war on whoever's behind this." Rowan glanced down at her, and that dangerous smile returned. "Yes, I have. Welcome to the game, little wolf. Try not to die before you've told me everything you know." They passed through the massive doors of the amphitheater into the moonlit night beyond, and Avellini realized with a start that she was still holding the immortal Alpha King's hand. She also realized that for the first time since Adrian's death, she didn't want to die anymore. She wanted revenge. And she'd just allied herself with the only creature in the kingdom powerful enough to help her get it. Chapter 2: The Eternal Sentinel's Shadow. The Alpha King's private quarters occupied the highest tower of Silvercrest Palace, a location that was either symbolic or strategic, depending on who you asked. Avellini had never been inside, few people had. Rowan Nightshade was famous for his reclusiveness, conducting most kingdom business through advisors and appearing in public only for mandatory ceremonies and the occasional reminder that he was still terrifyingly competent at warfare. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling up through stone that predated the current kingdom by centuries. Royal guards flanked them every few levels, each one dropping to one knee as Rowan passed without a word. His hand remained on Avellini's lower back, a gesture that would have seemed possessive if it didn't feel oddly steadying. She was still wearing her choosing ceremony dress, the white silk now creased from sitting on his lap, and her feet were bare as was tradition. Wolves were meant to feel the earth's energy during the mate recognition. Instead, she felt cold stone and rising terror as reality caught up with adrenaline. "I just accused a decorated commander of murder and conspiracy in front of the entire kingdom. I claim sanctuary by sitting on the Alpha King's lap. I'm either about to save the kingdom or die screaming." "Stop spiraling," Rowan said without looking back at her. "I'm not. You're projecting your terror so loudly I can taste it. Your wolf is 3 seconds from a panic shift, and if you destroy that dress, the royal seamstresses will be insufferable about the replacement." Despite everything, Avellini almost laughed. "You're worried about the seamstresses? I'm 347 years old. I've learned to pick my battles, and the head seamstress is scarier than most of the enemies I've faced in combat." He glanced back, one eyebrow raised. "Breathe, little wolf. Whatever happens next, it won't be boring." They reached the top of the tower, where ornate doors carved with lunar phases opened into rooms that stole Avellini's breath. She'd expected opulence. The Alpha King was royalty, after all. Instead, she found something that looked like a scholar's sanctuary crossed with a warrior's den. Books lined every wall, thousands of them, spines bearing titles in languages both living and dead. Weapons hung between the shelves, swords and spears and things with no names she recognized, each one positioned with the care of a cherished memory. Maps covered a massive oak table, some depicting the current kingdom, others showing places that might no longer exist. A fire burned in a hearth large enough to roast a whole deer, and comfortable chairs arranged around it suggested the Alpha King sometimes had guests, though the dust on most of them indicated this was rare. The entire eastern wall was glass, offering a view of the kingdom sprawling below like a sea of lights and darkness. "Sit," Rowan said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "You look like you're about to collapse." Avellini's legs folded gratefully. Now that the adrenaline was fading, exhaustion crashed over her in waves. She hadn't slept properly since Adrian's death, had barely eaten, and tonight's events had drained whatever reserves she had left. Rowan moved to a cabinet and returned with 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of something amber. He poured with the precise movements of someone who'd performed the gesture 1,000 times, then pressed a glass into her hand. "Drink. It'll help with the shock." "I don't." That wasn't a suggestion. His tone held command, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. "You've just painted a target on your back large enough to be seen from the moon. You'll need your wits sharp if you want to survive the next few days." The liquid burned going down, but warmth spread through her chest immediately. Not wine, something stronger, aged, expensive. The kind of drink you saved for significant moments or terrible ones. Rowan settled into the chair across from her, his movements economical and controlled even in relaxation. Without the crowd and ceremony between them, Avellini could actually look at him properly for the first time. The legends hadn't lied about his appearance. He looked perhaps 30, though his eyes held centuries. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, unfashionably long by current standards, but somehow fitting on him. His features were sharp, predatory, devastatingly symmetrical in a way that suggested the moon goddess had been showing off when she created him. But it was his eyes that captured attention, amber like old honey, ancient and knowing, and currently focused on Avellini with an intensity that made her want to confess every secret she'd ever held. "So," he said, swirling the liquid in his glass, "tell me everything. Start with your twin's death, and don't leave anything out. I've found that details everyone thinks are irrelevant often turn out to be the most important." Avellini took another sip for courage, then began talking. She told him about Adrian, not just his death, but who he'd been. The golden twin, charismatic and powerful, destined to inherit their father's pack. She described their bond, that connection that went deeper than blood, how she'd felt him die like someone had carved away half her soul. She explained his last conversations with her, how he'd been excited about something he'd discovered, but refused to share until he had proof. "He said it was about the moonborn prophecy," Avellini said, her voice rough with suppressed grief. "The one made the night we were born. That one of the Blackthorn twins would end the reign of wolves and begin the age of choice. Our father always dismissed it as nonsense, but Adrian found something. Some evidence that the prophecy was real." Rowan finished. His expression had gone very still. "Or manufactured for a purpose? I don't know. He died before he could tell me." She pulled the crushed moonstone from her pocket, the note still folded inside. "I found this hidden in his room. He left it for me." Rowan took the moonstone fragments carefully, reading Adrian's warning with those ancient eyes. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The bonds are not fate. They can be manufactured," he read aloud. "Your twin discovered how to manipulate mate bonds." He looked up at her sharply. "Did anyone else know about this?" "I don't think so." He was careful, paranoid even. Whatever he found scared him badly enough to hide evidence and leave cryptic warnings. Avellini leaned forward. "But here's what doesn't make sense. If someone killed Adrian to silence him, why would they then manufacture a mate bond between me and his murderer? That seems unnecessarily complicated. Unless the bond serves multiple purposes." Rowan stood, pacing to the window with predatory grace. Control being the obvious one. A mate bond is nearly impossible to resist. If Lucas claims you successfully, you'd be compelled by biology and magic to trust him, protect him, eventually love him. You'd stop investigating your brother's death. You might even believe his version of events completely. The horror of it settled over Avellini like ice water. She'd been so focused on rejecting Lucas that she hadn't fully considered what would have happened if she'd accepted the bond. The gradual erosion of doubt, the chemical rewriting of her thoughts and feelings, until she couldn't remember why she'd ever suspected her own mate of murder. But there's another purpose, Rowan continued, his reflection in the glass showing that dangerous expression again. The prophecy. One of the Blackthorn twins will end the reign of wolves. Your brother is dead. That leaves you. But I'm nobody, Avellini protested. Adrian was the powerful one, the future alpha. I'm just the twin who survived. Rowan turned to face her fully. And now you're under my personal protection, in my private quarters, telling me about manufactured mate bonds and conspiracies. If someone wanted to position themselves close to the crown while neutralizing a prophesied threat, arranging for that threat to be bound to them through a mate bond would be elegant strategy. Avellini's mind spun through the implications. You think Lucas is working for someone? Someone who's trying to manipulate the prophecy. Or fulfill it. Or prevent it. Prophecies are tricky things, Miss Blackthorn. I've learned that the hard way over 3 centuries. Something old and painful flickered across his expression. They have a way of coming true in the most unexpected ways, usually because someone tried too hard to prevent them. He moved back to his chair, settling into it with the casual power of a predator completely comfortable in its territory. Tell me about the night of the attack. Everything you know. Avellini recounted the official report, the rogue attack, the coordination, how Lucas had been found unconscious, but alive. Then she shared what she'd learned from her own investigation, the changed patrol schedule, the suspicious lack of scent trails from the supposed rogues, the fact that Adrian's wounds had been precise and efficient, not the chaotic savagery typical of rogue attacks. Lucas told my father the rogues were skilled, organized. He said they fought like a military unit. Avellini's voice hardened. But rogues aren't organized. They're outcasts, broken wolves operating alone or in small desperate groups. They don't coordinate battalion-level tactics. No, Rowan agreed quietly. But Royal Guard units do. As do elite pack warriors. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Miss Blackthorn, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Do you believe your father is involved in this conspiracy? The question hit like a physical blow. Avellini wanted to deny it immediately, to defend Alpha Marcus Blackthorn's honor. But she'd learned to mistrust her instincts since Adrian's death, to question the comfortable assumptions that kept you blind to painful truths. I don't know, she admitted. He's been different since Adrian died. Distant. He accepted the official report without question, discouraged me from investigating. Tonight, he tried to make you release me to his custody so I could complete the mate bond. She met Rowan's eyes. Either he's grieving and making bad decisions, or he knows more than he's saying. A wise answer. Trust no one until we know the full scope of this. Rowan leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. Now comes the difficult question, little wolf. What exactly do you want from me? I want justice for my twin, Avellini said immediately. I want whoever killed him exposed and punished. I want to know what he discovered about the prophecy and why it got him killed. And after that? Once you have your justice and your answers. The question confused her. What do you mean? I mean that you've just irrevocably altered your life's trajectory. You rejected your moon goddess-ordained mate in the most public way possible. You've claimed sanctuary with the crown, which means Lucas can't touch you, but it also means you can never go back to your old life. The Nightfall Pack won't accept you back, you're a rejected mate, tainted by scandal. His voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel, simply stating reality. Your father may disown you to preserve the Pack's honor. You'll be effectively exiled from everything you've known. The weight of it crashed over Avellini. In her desperation to escape Lucas and seek justice for Adrian, she hadn't thought past the immediate moment. Now the full consequences unfurled before her like a dark road with no visible end. So, what happens to me? She whispered. Rowan's expression softened fractionally. That depends. You can stay under my protection until this is resolved. Help with the investigation, testify when we expose whoever's behind this, then accept whatever exile or punishment your father decrees. You'll be alive but alone, a cautionary tale about wolves who reject their mates. He paused, amber eyes holding hers with unreadable intention. Or, he continued, you can accept a different kind of bond. Not a mate bond, I buried my mate 200 years ago, and wolves only love once. But a pack bond. Join my household, become one of my personal wolves. I can use someone with your investigative instincts and obvious courage, and you'd have the crown's protection permanently, not just temporarily. Avellini's breath caught. You're offering me a place in the royal pack? I'm offering you a choice. Something my kind rarely gets. Rowan's voice held something complicated, approval, maybe, or recognition. Your twin's note said the bonds are not fate, that they can be manufactured. But even natural mate bonds remove choice from the equation. You meet your mate and biology decides your future. You had no say in being bonded to your brother's killer. He leaned back, that dangerous smile returning. I'm giving you what the moon goddess apparently forgot to provide, agency over your own destiny. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. The fire crackled in the silence. Outside the glass wall, the kingdom sprawled below like a promise or a threat. Avellini thought about Adrian, about that twin bond that had been her anchor her entire life. She thought about Lucas's smile and the calculating coldness she'd seen beneath it. She thought about prophecies and manufactured fates and the way everyone kept telling her what she must do. Then she thought about the note. The bonds are not fate. If I join your household, she said carefully, I help investigate the conspiracy. I don't just serve drinks and arrange your schedule. Miss Blackthorne, if I wanted a secretary, I'd hire one. I want an operative. Someone motivated, intelligent, and desperate enough to do what's necessary. Rowan's eyes glinted. Someone the conspirators will underestimate because she's young and grief-stricken and apparently traumatized enough to throw herself at the Alpha King's mercy. You'd be my eyes and ears in places I can't reach, my weapon in a war most of the kingdom doesn't know is being fought. And if we find proof that Lucas killed Adrian, then you'll stand beside me when I tear out his throat personally. The promise was delivered with such casual certainty that Avellini believed him completely. This was no politician making empty threats. This was an ancient predator who'd built a kingdom on blood and kept it through fear and absolute confidence. This was someone who could actually give her what she needed, vengeance. I accept, Avellini said. I'll join your household. I'll help expose whoever's behind this. And when it's done, she smiled, and it felt feral. I want to watch you destroy them. Rowan's answering smile was satisfied and sharp. Welcome to the game, little wolf. He raised his glass. To justice, revenge, and the ancient art of ruining conspiracies. Avellini raised her own glass, the crystal catching firelight. To choices, she said. They drank, and outside the window, the moon rose higher over a kingdom that had no idea how completely everything was about to change. Chapter 3. The Manufactured Truth. Morning arrived with soft insistence, sunlight filtering through the tower's glass wall and painting geometric patterns across Avellini's borrowed bed. She woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was before memory crashed back. The choosing ceremony, Lucas's predatory smile, the insane gambit that had led to her sitting on the Alpha King's lap. I've allied myself with an immortal, she thought, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. Either that was brilliant or I've signed my death warrant in the most complicated way possible. A knock on the door prevented further existential panic. Avellini wrapped the silk robe she'd been provided around herself. Someone had left a complete wardrobe in the guest room while she slept, clothes in her exact size, which was either impressive efficiency or mildly terrifying, and opened the door to find a young woman with silver-streaked hair and the patient expression of someone used to managing chaos. Miss Blackthorne. I'm Elena, His Majesty's steward. He's requested you join him for breakfast and briefing at your earliest convenience. Elena's tone suggested earliest convenience meant immediately. I've drawn you a bath and selected appropriate attire. You have 20 minutes. The efficiency was military-grade. Avellini found herself bathed, dressed in practical black clothing that suggested combat readiness rather than courtly fashion, and ushered through the tower's labyrinthine corridors before she'd fully processed being awake. Rowan's private study made his quarters look minimalist by comparison. 3 walls were covered floor to ceiling with books and scrolls, some looking ancient enough to crumble at a touch. The 4th wall held weapons, not decorative pieces, but working blades that showed signs of use and careful maintenance. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in maps and documents, and what looked suspiciously like intelligence reports. The Alpha King himself stood at the desk, already fully dressed despite the early hour, his attention focused on a particular map. He looked up as she entered, and Avellini was struck again by those amber eyes that had seen centuries pass. "Coffee or tea?" he asked, gesturing to a sidebar where both waited. "Coffee. Black." Avellini approached the desk, curiosity overriding lingering nervousness. "You don't sleep much, do you?" 3 hours a night. One of the perks of immortality, you need less rest than mortal wolves. Rowan poured her coffee with practiced efficiency, then returned to his map. "I've been reviewing 300 years of Mooborn prophecies. Did you know there have been 47 prophecies made about my reign? Most of them contradictory, all of them dramatic, none of them particularly useful." Avellini studied the documents scattered across the desk. Lists of names, dates, interconnecting lines drawn in multiple colors. The work of someone methodically mapping a conspiracy. "Have you found anything about my brother's prophecy specifically?" "Nothing beyond the standard recording in the Seer's archives. One of the Blackthorn twins will end the reign of wolves and begin the Age of Choice. Typically vague, open to a dozen interpretations." Rowan tapped a finger on a particular document. "But I found something interesting about the seer who made the prophecy. Mother Celeste, the same high priestess who presided over your choosing ceremony, recorded it personally. She was only 70 years old at the time, relatively young for a seer. Is that significant? Perhaps. Young seers are more prone to external influence. Their visions can be suggested if someone knows the right techniques." He pulled out another document, this one showing a genealogical chart. "More interesting is who attended your birth. Your father, obviously. Your mother, who died in childbirth, my condolences. The pack healer. And Commander Lucas Thornrich, who was present as your father's then second in command." Avellini's blood chilled. Lucas was there when the prophecy was made? Present in the room when a young seer prophesied that one of the newborn twins would end the reign of wolves. Rowan's voice was grim. 23 years later, one twin is dead and the other is mate-bonded to the same commander who witnessed the prophecy. Either the moon goddess has a twisted sense of irony, or someone's been planning this for over 2 decades. The implications were staggering. Avellini gripped her coffee cup hard enough that the ceramic creaked. "You think Lucas has been preparing since I was born? That he somehow manipulated events to ensure he'd be bonded to me? I think someone has been very patient and very clever." Rowan moved to a different map, this one showing the kingdom's packed territories. Red marks dotted the landscape like a rash. Over the past 23 years, there have been 97 suspicious deaths among wolves who had direct contact with Mooborn seers. Most were dismissed as accidents or rogue attacks. But the pattern is clear once you look for it. Someone has been systematically eliminating anyone who might expose manufactured prophecies or bonds. He pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "I've also been reviewing records from 200 years ago, when someone last tried to manipulate the mate bonds. My mate, Lyanna, was investigating it when she died. She'd discovered that a radical faction wanted to eliminate the mate bond system entirely, believing it enslaved wolves to biological imperatives. They developed a ritual using Mooborn magic to sever existing bonds and prevent new ones from forming." Avellini set down her coffee carefully. "Your mate died investigating bond manipulation, and now someone's doing it again. That's why you believed me. That's why I take your accusations very seriously." Lyanna was brilliant, thorough, paranoid about verification. "She died 3 days before she was scheduled to present her evidence to me." Rowan's expression was carefully controlled, but centuries of pain showed beneath. The official report said rogue attack. "I never found the wolves responsible. For 200 years, I've wondered if I missed something, if the conspiracy she'd uncovered had deeper roots than I realized." "You think it's the same group?" "I think conspiracies don't die just because you cut off one head. They adapt, wait, recruit new members. He closed the journal with deliberate care. If this is the same faction, they've had 2 centuries to perfect their techniques. Manufacturing mate bonds would be an evolution of their original goal, not eliminating the bond system, but controlling it. Imagine being able to determine who bonds with whom. You could manipulate entire pack hierarchies, ensure loyal wolves bond with threats, place your operatives at every level of power. The scope of it was breathtaking and terrifying. But why target me specifically? I'm nobody important. You're the surviving half of a prophecy about ending the reign of wolves. That makes you either a threat to be neutralized or a tool to be controlled. Rowan studied her with those ancient, knowing eyes. The question is which? Does the prophecy mean you'll literally end my reign? Destroy the kingdom? Or does it mean something else entirely, perhaps ending the reign of the old ways, the biological imperatives that control our kind? Avellini remembered her twin's words. The bonds are not fate. Adrian believed in choice. He hated how mate bonds forced people into relationships they might not want. He used to joke about finding a way to make the system optional, letting wolves choose their partners without biology's interference. The age of choice, Rowan murmured. Perhaps the prophecy isn't about destroying kingdoms, but about giving wolves agency over their own destinies. That would certainly threaten certain factions who profit from the current system's predictability. A knock interrupted them. Elena appeared at the door, her expression professionally neutral, but her scent carrying tension. Your Majesty, Mother Celeste is here with her preliminary report. She's brought additional information you should hear. The High Priestess entered with the careful dignity of extreme age, her ceremonial robes replaced by simpler attire, but her presence no less commanding. She inclined her head to Rowan, then glanced at Avellini with an expression that was hard to read, not hostile exactly, but cautious. Your Majesty, I've spent the night reviewing our archives and consulting with the remaining Elder Seers. Mother Celeste's voice was grave. What Miss Blackthorne claimed is possible. The mate bonds can be manipulated. The confirmation, even expected, sent shock through the room. Rowan gestured to a chair. Explain. Mother Celeste settled slowly, as if her bones protested movement. The mate bond is divine magic, yes, but it operates through specific mechanisms: scent recognition, soul resonance, biological compatibility. Each component can be artificially replicated or enhanced through moo-born rituals. It requires extensive preparation, rare materials, and access to both wolves during their formative years, but it can be done. How extensive is the preparation? Avellini asked, her mind racing. Years. The ritual components must be applied repeatedly during specific lunar phases, beginning in childhood. Think of it as programming compatibility into 2 wolves' fundamental natures. Mother Celeste's expression was troubled. The process is incredibly delicate. One mistake and the bond won't take. But if done correctly, the manufactured bond is indistinguishable from a natural one. Rowan's hands clenched on his desk. How many seers would know this technique? In the current generation? Perhaps 3, myself included. But 200 years ago, before the Great Purge. She hesitated. Your mate, Lina, had documented evidence that an entire council of seers had been corrupted, using their knowledge to serve what she called the Free Will faction. The same faction I thought I destroyed. Rowan's voice was deadly quiet. How did they survive? Knowledge survives, Your Majesty. Written in hidden texts, passed down through apprenticeships, preserved in places you'd never think to look. Mother Celeste pulled a small book from her robes, the leather worn smooth by time. I found this in the restricted archives last night. It belonged to Seer Marcus, who died during your purge 200 years ago. But before his death, he'd taken apprentices. The knowledge continued. Rowan took the book carefully, flipping through pages covered in detailed diagrams and ritual instructions. His expression grew darker with each page. This is comprehensive. Everything needed to manufacture bonds, sever them, even create false prophecies that would register as genuine to most seers. There's more. Mother Celeste straightened despite obvious discomfort. The prophecy about the Blackthorn twins, I've been reviewing my memories of that night. I was young, inexperienced, proud to be recording such a significant birth. But now, with decades of experience, I remember irregularities. My trance state felt guided rather than spontaneous. The words came easily, too easily, as if someone had already written the script. Avalini's breath caught. You're saying someone fed you that prophecy? I'm saying someone manipulated a naive young seer into believing she was receiving genuine divine vision. The prophecy was designed to sound significant, to mark the twins as special, to ensure everyone would pay attention to them. Mother Celeste's ancient eyes were sorrowful. I've been a pawn in this game for 23 years, child. I'm deeply sorry. The room fell silent. Rowan set down the book with careful precision, his control absolute, but his power thrumming beneath like barely contained lightning. Commander Thornridge was present at that birth, he said quietly. If the prophecy was manufactured, he would have needed access to both twins during their formative years to establish the bond groundwork. Miss Blackthorn, how often did Lucas interact with you as children? Avalini's mind raced through memories. He was my father's second-in-command, so he was always around. He trained us in combat, taught us pack history, spent time with our family. Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. He was there constantly. For our entire childhood. Every full moon ceremony, every pack gathering, every important moment. Establishing the bond components, Mother Celeste confirmed. It would have been simple, a touch here, a shared meal there, exposure during specific lunar phases. To everyone else, he was simply a dedicated pack member helping raise the Alpha's children. But he was actually weaving a manufactured bond that would activate during your choosing ceremony. But why bond with Avalini specifically? Elena asked from her position by the door. If he wanted to control the prophecy, wouldn't the male twin have been the more obvious choice? Because I'm the disposable one, Avalini said bitterly. Adrian was the heir, too valuable and too watched to risk. I was the shadow twin, the spare. No one would question Lucas taking interest in me. And once I was bonded to him. She met Rowan's eyes. I could be used to control Adrian if needed. Or eliminated easily after my brother died, leaving Lucas perfectly positioned to support whatever comes next in their plan. The age of choice, Rowan said softly. If the conspiracy's goal is to give wolves agency over mate bonds, they'd need to demonstrate that the current system is corrupt and manipulable. What better demonstration than exposing manufactured bonds at the highest levels? Create enough chaos and fear, and wolves might demand a complete restructuring of the system. Which would destabilize the entire kingdom, Elena added. 300 years of peace based on the sanctity of mate bonds, suddenly revealed as a lie. Pacts would fracture, alliances would collapse. And in the chaos, Avalini finished, someone could seize power. End the reign of wolves. Begin something new. The puzzle pieces assembled into a horrifying picture. A conspiracy 2 centuries old, patient enough to wait through generations, manipulating bloodlines and prophecies and bonds to create the perfect moment for revolution. Rowan stood abruptly, moving to the weapon wall. He selected a particular sword, testing its balance with movements that spoke of countless battles. Mother Celeste, I need every name of every seer who might possess this knowledge. Every apprentice, every wolf who had access to the restricted archives, everyone. Elena, begin discreet inquiries into Lucas Thornridge's activities over the past 23 years, finances, travel, communications, everything. If he's part of a larger conspiracy, there will be connections we can trace. And me? Avalini asked, standing as well. Rowan turned to her, and his smile was predatory and approving. You, little wolf, are going to do something dangerous and necessary. You're going to let Lucas think he's winning. Chapter 4. The calculated risk. The plan was insane. Avalini had said so 3 times, and Rowan had agreed each time while simultaneously insisting it was their best option. Conspiracies operate in shadows, he'd explained, mapping out the strategy with military precision. They rely on secrecy, on their enemies not knowing the full scope of their operation. Right now, they think you've escaped their control by claiming sanctuary with me. But they don't know that we've uncovered their methods. We can use that. Now, 2 days later, Avalini stood in a private courtyard within the palace grounds, waiting for the meeting Rowan had arranged. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, torn between instinct and will. Lucas was coming. The mate bond pulled at her even now, despite everything she knew. Biology didn't care about murder or conspiracy, it only knew that her supposed perfect match was approaching, and every cell in her body wanted to respond. Fighting it required constant mental effort, like pushing against an invisible current that wanted to drag her toward him. "You're projecting terror again." Rowan's voice came from the shadows where he waited, invisible to anyone who might be watching, but close enough to intervene if necessary. "Breathe. Remember what we discussed." Avellini forced herself to breathe evenly, to center her thoughts. The plan was simple in theory: make Lucas believe she was weakening, that the mate bond was overriding her suspicions, that she might be manipulated after all. Let him think he was regaining control while they gathered evidence of his co-conspirators. In practice, it meant spending time alone with her twin's killer, while pretending her disgust was actually confusion. For Adrian, she reminded herself. For the truth. Lucas appeared at the courtyard entrance, and the mate bond flared like fire in her blood. He dressed carefully, simple, non-threatening clothing, his handsome face arranged in an expression of earnest concern. To anyone watching, he looked like a devoted mate worried about his chosen one. Avellini knew better. She'd spent 2 days studying everything Rowan had compiled about him, every suspicious detail of his meteoric rise through the ranks, every convenient absence during critical moments. Lucas Thornridge was brilliant, patient, and utterly ruthless beneath his charming exterior. Avellini. Her name on his lips carried longing and pain. He stopped at a respectful distance, not pressuring her, playing the role perfectly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know you have questions, and you deserve answers." "Do I?" She kept her voice controlled, neither hostile nor welcoming. Uncertain, as if she was questioning her own judgment. "Everyone keeps telling me the mate bond is sacred, that rejecting it is wrong. But you were Adrian's best friend. You were with him when he died. I tried to save him." Lucas's voice broke convincingly. "Avellini, you have to believe me. Those rogues came out of nowhere. Adrian fought like a demon, but there were too many. I was knocked unconscious trying to defend him. When I woke up..." He looked away, as if the memory was too painful. "I've relived that night 1,000 times, wishing I'd been faster, stronger. Your brother was like family to me." The lie was flawless. If she hadn't known the truth, hadn't seen the evidence, she would have believed him completely. The mate bond reinforced his words, making them feel trustworthy, right? Then why does everyone say I'm wrong to question it? Avellini let vulnerability creep into her voice, the uncertainty of someone whose world had shattered. "Adrian left me a note. He said the bonds aren't fate, that they can be manufactured." Was he losing his mind? Was grief making him paranoid? Lucas's eyes sharpened fractionally, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. What note? Something about the bonds being manipulable. About trusting no one. She watched him carefully, looking for tells. It doesn't make sense. If mate bonds could be manufactured, wouldn't the seers know? Wouldn't the Alpha King have discovered it in 300 years? "Your brother was brilliant," Lucas said slowly, "but he was also investigating dangerous territory. The prophecy about you and him, some wolves don't believe in such things. They think prophecies and bonds are tools used to control us, and they wanted Adrian to help them prove it. I tried to warn him that pursuing that line of thinking was dangerous." The admission was clever, acknowledged the conspiracy while positioning himself as outside it, even as someone who'd tried to protect Adrian from it. Avellini felt grudging respect for the manipulation's sophistication. "Who were these wolves?" she asked. "I don't know all of them. Adrian was secretive about his contacts." Lucas took a careful step closer. "But I know he was meeting with someone in the old quarter, near the Seer archives. He wouldn't tell me who, just that he'd found proof of something that would change everything. More breadcrumbs, leading away from him and toward nebulous others." Rowan had predicted this. Lucas would try to redirect her investigation toward false trails, while slowly rebuilding her trust through the mate bond. "I want to believe you," Avellini whispered, and it wasn't entirely acting. Part of her, the part governed by biology and magic, did want to believe him, to accept the bond and stop fighting. But the Alpha King says the bonds can be manipulated. Mother Celeste confirmed it. If that's true, How do I know what I'm feeling for you is real? Lucas moved closer, and the bond pulled harder. Because I felt it too, Avellini. Since we were children, I felt connected to you in ways I couldn't explain. I thought it was just protective instinct. You were my alpha's daughter, my friend's sister. But when the choosing ceremony happened and I recognized you. His hand reached out, stopping just short of touching her. This is real. Whatever doubts your brother planted, whatever the king is telling you, this bond is genuine. I can feel it in my soul. The performance was masterful. Avellini could almost see why Adrian had trusted him, why her father still did. Lucas had perfected the art of sincerity, manufacturing emotions as effectively as he'd manufactured the bond itself. The king says I should stay under his protection while they investigate, she said, watching his reaction carefully. The king is using you. Lucas's voice took on an edge of frustration, quickly controlled. Think about it, Avellini. He's 300 years old, immortal, alone. His mate died 2 centuries ago. Now he has a young she-wolf who's vulnerable, confused, and prophesied to end the reign of wolves. Don't you think that's convenient? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Rowan Nightshade has been looking for a way to die for 200 years. Immortality without a mate is torture. Every wolf knows that. What if he's trying to use you to fulfill the prophecy? End his reign by manipulating you into whatever action will finally kill him. The theory was elaborate and would have been convincing to someone who hadn't spent the past 2 days with Rowan. Avellini had seen the immortal king's dedication to uncovering the truth, his meticulous investigation, the old pain he carried about his mate's death. Whatever Rowan's motivations, suicide by prophecy wasn't among them. But she pretended to consider it, letting doubt show on her face. I hadn't thought of that. Because you're grieving and vulnerable, exactly as he wants you. Lucas finally touched her, just his fingertips against her arm, and the bond roared in response. Come back to your pack, Avellini. Let me protect you from all of this. The conspiracies, the politics, the king's manipulations. Whatever you need to feel safe, I'll provide. But please, don't let them turn you against what we could have together. The touch made it harder to think clearly. Avellini's wolf surged forward, wanting more contact, wanting to accept him despite everything her rational mind knew. She let herself sway slightly toward him, as if the bond was winning. I need time, she managed. Everything is so confused right now. Of course. Lucas stepped back, releasing her, and the relief was immediate. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready, I'll be here, waiting for you. He left with the same careful dignity he'd arrived with, and Avellini stood in the courtyard breathing hard, feeling like she'd just survived combat. Rowan emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Well, he's good, Avellini admitted. Really good. He positioned himself as the victim, suggested you're manipulating me, even implied you're suicidal. If I were actually confused and vulnerable, he'd have me questioning everything. But you're not confused. Rowan studied her with those ancient eyes. Though the bond is affecting you more than you expected. It's like fighting a riptide. Every instinct says to give in, that he's safe and right and meant for me. Avellini shuddered. How did anyone resist manufactured bonds if they didn't know they were manufactured? They didn't. That's the entire purpose of the manipulation, to create bonds so powerful they override critical thinking. He gestured toward the palace. Come. Elena has found something interesting in Lucas's financial records. Back in Rowan's study, Elena had spread documents across every available surface. The steward looked exhausted but triumphant, her silver-streaked hair escaping its usual neat arrangement. Found the connection, she announced without preamble. Lucas Thornridge has been receiving regular payments from a shell company based in the Eastern Territories for the past 15 years. Small amounts, carefully disguised as various legitimate transactions, but the pattern is clear once you map it out. She pointed to a timeline she'd constructed. The payments increased significantly in the months before Adrian Blackthorn's death. And 3 weeks before the attack, Lucas made a large withdrawal in cash, the kind of payment you'd make to hire skilled mercenaries for a very specific job. Rowan leaned over the documents, his expression focused. The shell company who owns it? That's where it gets interesting. 3 layers of corporate bureaucracy, but at the center. Elena pulled out a final document with a flourish. The Free Will Collective. A philosophical organization supposedly dedicated to promoting individual choice among wolf packs. They've been operating openly for 50 years, positioning themselves as reformers rather than radicals. Hiding in plain sight, Avellini breathed. Everyone thinks they're idealists, not conspirators. The best cover is always the truth, slightly modified. Rowan straightened, his mind clearly racing through implications. A group advocating for choice and autonomy wouldn't seem threatening. They'd attract true believers, wolves genuinely concerned about mandatory mate bonds. Those believers would provide cover for the core members actually working to destabilize the kingdom. Do we have names of the core members? Avellini asked. Elena's expression darkened. Some. Most are wolves no one would suspect, scholars, healers, low-ranking pack members. But there's one name that will complicate things considerably. She pulled out a specific document, handing it to Rowan. The Alpha King's face went very still as he read. When he looked up, his eyes held dangerous fire. Alpha Marcus Blackthorn has been funding the Free Will Collective for 12 years. The room spun. Avellini grabbed the desk for support, unable to process what she'd heard. My father? No. He wouldn't. He loved Adrian. He'd never. The payments are hidden, but they're substantial and regular. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Your father has been one of the collective's primary financial supporters since before you and your brother came of age. But why? Avellini's voice cracked. If he was part of this, why would they kill Adrian? Why would he allow it? Rowan moved to her side, his presence steadying. Perhaps he didn't know the full scope of their plans. Perhaps he genuinely believes in their stated goals, more choice, less biological imperatives, and doesn't realize the organization has radical elements willing to commit murder. Or perhaps... He paused, his voice careful. Perhaps the prophecy was more literal than we realized. One twin to end the reign of wolves. If your father believed in that destiny. No. Avellini stepped back, horror washing over her. You're suggesting my father sacrificed Adrian to preserve me because of a prophecy? That he chose which twin would fulfill it? I'm suggesting we don't yet know all the variables in play. Rowan's tone was measured, avoiding speculation while acknowledging possibilities. What we know is that your father has financial ties to the organization funding Lucas Thornridge. Whether that makes him complicit in Adrian's death or simply a pawn in a larger game, we need more evidence to determine. The betrayal felt physical, like another piece of her soul being carved away. First Adrian's death, then the manufactured mate bond, and now her father potentially involved in all of it. How much of her life had been orchestrated by others? How many of her relationships had been genuine? What do we do? She asked numbly. We spring the trap. Rowan moved to his weapon wall, selecting several blades with practiced ease. Lucas thinks he's regaining your trust. The collective thinks their plan is intact. Your father believes he's protected his secrets. They're all wrong, and they're about to discover exactly how dangerous that mistake is. Elena pulled out maps marked with locations throughout the capital. The Free Will Collective is holding their monthly gathering tomorrow night at a warehouse in the Merchant Quarter. They think it's secret, but we've had eyes on them for weeks now thanks to Mother Celeste's information. Lucas will be there. Based on Elena's financial tracking, Alpha Marcus might be as well. So we raid the gathering, expose the conspiracy, and end this. Avellini's hands clenched into fists. I want to be there when it happens. Of course you do. Rowan's smile was sharp and approving. You're going to walk in as their honored guest, the surviving Blackthorn twin, the prophesied wolf who'll end the reign. Lucas will have convinced them you're finally coming around to their perspective. And while they're celebrating their victory, his eyes glinted with predatory satisfaction. We'll show them what happens when you threaten my kingdom. The plan was dangerous, requiring perfect timing and Avellini's ability to maintain her cover while surrounded by conspirators. But looking at the evidence spread across Rowan's desk, at the careful documentation of 200 years of manipulation, Avellini felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. They'd killed her twin. They'd manufactured a bond to control her. They'd used her entire family as pieces in their game. Tomorrow night, the game would end. I'm ready, she said, meeting Rowan's ancient gaze with her own steel. "Let's end this reign they're so worried about." His answering smile was fierce and proud. "Welcome to war, little wolf. Try not to enjoy it too much." Chapter 5. The Age of Choice. The merchant quarter warehouse looked abandoned from the outside. Weathered wood, broken windows, the kind of building no one would look at twice. Perfect cover for a secret gathering of revolutionaries who'd been planning their coup for 2 centuries. Avellini approached with Lucas at her side, playing her role flawlessly. She'd spent the day pretending the mate bond was winning, letting him believe his manipulation was working. Every touch made her skin crawl, but she'd smiled through it, asked the right questions, expressed the right doubts about the Alpha King's intentions. Now Lucas's hand rested possessively on her lower back as he guided her toward the warehouse entrance, and his scent carried satisfaction. He thought he'd won. "I'm proud of you," he murmured, his breath against her ear making her wolf recoil internally while she forced herself to lean into the touch. "I know how hard it is to question everything you've been taught. But you're finally seeing the truth about how our kind has been enslaved by biology and divine mandate." "I want to understand," Avellini said, keeping her voice uncertain and seeking. Adrian believed in choice. "If there's a way to honor that, to give wolves agency over their own lives." She let the sentence trail off meaningfully. "There is. And tonight, you'll meet others who've dedicated their lives to making it possible." Lucas opened the warehouse door, revealing a space that was anything but abandoned inside. Dozens of wolves filled the interior, which had been converted into a surprisingly sophisticated meeting hall. Tapestries covered the walls, depicting the moon goddess not in her traditional form, but as a figure offering a choice between 2 paths. Comfortable seating arranged in a circle suggested democratic discussion rather than hierarchical command. The wolves themselves ranged from young idealists to gray-muzzled elders, all wearing expressions of genuine belief in their cause. Not all monsters looked like monsters, Avellini realized. Some looked like people who sincerely believed they were saving the world. "Brothers and sisters," Lucas announced, his voice carrying natural authority, "I present Avellini Blackthorn, the surviving twin of prophecy. She's ready to hear our truth." The assembled wolves murmured welcomes, and several approached with genuine warmth. A young she-wolf not much older than Avellini clasped her hands. "Thank you for coming," the she-wolf said, her eyes bright with fervor. "I was bonded to a male who beat me, but the sacred bond made me defend him, love him even as he hurt me. The collective helped me break that bond. They gave me back my choice, my life. Whatever they ask of you, please listen. They saved me." The testimonial was clearly sincere, and Avellini felt her hatred waver slightly. Not everyone here was a murderer. Some were genuinely victims of a system that forced biological bonds regardless of compatibility or safety. The cause itself might have started from legitimate grievances. But good intentions didn't excuse murder. "I'll listen," Avellini promised the she-wolf, then allowed Lucas to guide her to the center circle where the collective's leadership waited. Alpha Marcus Blackthorn sat among them. The sight of her father struck Avellini like a physical blow. Marcus looked older than she'd ever seen him, his face drawn with exhaustion and what might have been guilt. His eyes widened when he saw her, shock, and then something like relief crossing his features. "Avellini," he breathed, standing. "Lucas said you might come, but I didn't dare believe." He moved toward her, arms outstretched for an embrace. She stepped back, keeping her expression neutral despite the fury and hurt roiling inside. "Father, I didn't know you'd be here." "I've been part of this movement since before you were born," Marcus said, lowering his arms slowly. "When the Moo-born seer prophesied that one of my children would end the reign of wolves, I began investigating what that might mean. I found the collective, learned about manufactured bonds, discovered the truth about how our kind has been enslaved by biology. Everything I've done has been to ensure you and your brother could choose your own destinies." "Is that why Adrian died?" The question came out sharper than intended. Was his death part of ensuring our choice? Marcus's face crumpled. "No. Gods, no. Adrian's death was—" He looked at Lucas, confusion clouding his expression. "You said it was rogues. A coordinated attack. It was necessary. The new voice came from the shadows of the circle's edge, and a figure emerged that made Avellini's blood freeze. Mother Celeste, the High Priestess, moved into the light with her ceremonial robes replaced by simpler attire, but her presence no less commanding. Behind her, a dozen other seers followed, including several Avellini recognized from the temple. The prophecy required one twin to end the reign. Mother Celeste continued calmly. Adrian was too visible, too powerful, too bound by traditional thinking. He would have led the kingdom into war when he discovered our methods. But you, Avellini, you've always questioned, always sought deeper truths. You were always the twin meant to fulfill the prophecy. The betrayal was complete. The same seer who'd confessed manipulation to the Alpha King was revealed as the conspiracy's true leader. The remorse she'd shown in Rowan's study had been another layer of deception. You lied to the king, Avellini said, her voice steady despite shock. Your confession, the evidence you provided, all of it was misdirection. I gave him enough truth to make him trust me, while hiding the full scope of our operation. Mother Celeste smiled, and it held no warmth. Rowan Nightshade is brilliant, but he's also haunted by his mate's death. I knew he'd believe any narrative that connected current events to that old wound. He's been investigating phantom conspiracies, while the real work continued right under his nose. Lucas moved closer to Avellini, his hand closing around her wrist. The Alpha King has kept our kind enslaved to biological imperatives for 300 years. The mate bond system ensures predictable hierarchies, prevents true individual choice, maintains his power through divine mandate. But tonight, we end that reign. Tonight, you fulfill your destiny. Avellini felt the trap closing around her, the careful plan she'd made with Rowan suddenly seeming woefully inadequate. These weren't simple conspirators, they were true believers with decades of planning and the power of moonborn seers behind them. But she'd prepared for this. They all had. So you did manufacture my bond with Lucas, she said, keeping her voice level, playing for time. My entire life has been orchestrated to bring me to this moment. To bring you to choice, Mother Celeste corrected. Yes, we shaped events. Yes, we manipulated probabilities. But the choice to stand with us is yours alone. We offer you genuine agency, the chance to help us dismantle a system that's enslaved wolves for millennia. With the Royal Seer's support and the prophesied twins' participation, we can restructure the entire bond system. Make it optional. Give every wolf the choice to accept or reject their mate, to form bonds based on love rather than biology. And if they choose to keep the current system? Avellini asked. If some wolves want their divinely ordained mates, then they're welcome to them. But no wolf should be forced into a bond against their will. Mother Celeste's expression held genuine passion. Your friend who was beaten by her bonded mate, should she have been forced to endure that because the moon goddess decreed it? Your own situation, bonded to your brother's killer even if you hadn't known, would that bond have been right simply because it was ordained? The argument was compelling because it touched on real problems. Avellini thought of stories she'd heard, wolves trapped in abusive bonds, unable to leave because biology demanded they love their abusers. The current system wasn't perfect. Perhaps change was necessary. But not this way. Not through murder and manipulation and centuries of conspiracy. You killed my brother, she said flatly. Whatever your justifications, whatever noble goals you're pretending to serve, you murdered Adrian to ensure I'd fulfill your prophecy. That's not choice. That's control. It was necessity, Lucas began, but Avellini cut him off. It was murder. And you, she turned to her father, letting all her hurt and fury show. You funded them. Supported them. Whether you knew about Adrian or not, you chose this movement over your own children's safety. Marcus looked stricken. I thought I was protecting you. Ensuring you'd have choices I never did. My mate bond with your mother was difficult. She never truly loved me, only what the bond forced her to feel. When she died giving birth to you and Adrian, I swore my children would have better. Would have real choice. So you allied with people who manipulate the very bonds you claim to oppose. Avellini shook her head. You can't free people through control. You can't give choice by removing it. Whatever this started as, it became exactly what you supposedly fight against. Enough philosophy. Mother Celeste's voice hardened. You have two choices, Avalini Blackthorn. Stand with us and help reshape the kingdom into something better, or stand against us and die as your brother did. The prophecy will be fulfilled one way or another. There's a third option, Avalini said and smiled. The one where your entire conspiracy burns. She triggered the signal, a specific pattern of taps against her thigh that would appear nervous fidgeting to any observer. But Rowan was watching. He'd been watching from the moment she entered the warehouse, hidden among the shadows with 24 royal guards and loyal pack warriors. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Guards poured through every entrance, silver chains and suppression collars ready. Rowan himself appeared from the shadows like vengeance incarnate, moving too fast for mortal eyes to track, taking down 3 seers before they could activate whatever Moo-born magic they'd prepared. Lucas's grip on Avalini's wrist tightened viciously as he realized the betrayal. You. She drove her knee into his stomach with all her strength, breaking his hold. I choose not you, she snarled. I choose justice for my twin. I choose ending manipulators who think they can play goddess with people's lives. The fighting was brutal but brief. The collective's members were believers, not warriors, and most surrendered quickly when confronted with the full force of royal authority. The seers tried to activate rituals, but Rowan had brought Mother Celeste's real apprentices, the ones who'd been horrified by their mistress's corruption, and they countered each attempted spell. Mother Celeste herself stood untouched in the center circle, her expression serene despite her conspiracy's collapse around her. You think this ends tonight? We're everywhere, child. In every pack, every temple, every level of power. You can't arrest us all. No, Rowan agreed, appearing beside her with preternatural speed. But I can make sure you never manipulate another soul. His hand touched Mother Celeste's forehead, and ancient power flared, the kind that only immortals commanded. The High Priestess's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. What did you do? Avalini asked. Severed her connection to Moo-born magic. She'll live, but she'll never perform another ritual, never touch the sacred bonds again. Rowan's expression was cold. Death would have been kinder, but I've learned that sometimes living with consequences is a more effective punishment. Lucas was being dragged away in silver chains, still fighting, still insisting they'd been right to kill Adrian. Marcus Blackthorn stood frozen, staring at the destruction of everything he'd believed in, aged a decade in minutes. The warehouse slowly quieted as conspirators were secured and evidence gathered. Avalini stood in the center of it all, feeling simultaneously triumphant and empty. They'd won. The conspiracy was exposed. Justice for Adrian would be served. But her brother was still dead, her father had betrayed her, and the mate bond with Lucas still pulled at her blood despite everything. Rowan appeared at her side, his presence solid and steady in the chaos. You did well, little wolf. I feel like I should be celebrating, Avalini admitted. But mostly I'm just tired. That's the aftermath of adrenaline and battle. It'll pass. He studied her with those ancient amber eyes. What you did tonight, exposing corruption that's existed for centuries, facing down your brother's killers, making choices when biology and magic tried to control you, very few wolves would have your strength. My brother had more strength. He was investigating this alone, without help, and almost succeeded. And now you've finished what he started. That's not weakness, Avalini. That's honor. Around them, the cleanup continued. Royal guards processed prisoners, documented evidence, secured the corrupted seers. Several of the collective's true believers were crying, their worldview shattered by the realization that their idealistic movement had been manipulated by murderers. What happens now? Avalini asked. To the collective's members who didn't know about the murders? To wolves who genuinely believed they were fighting for choice? That depends. Rowan gestured to where Marcus Blackthorn sat, head in hands, guarded but not restrained. Some, like your father, will face justice for their complicity regardless of intention. Others who truly didn't know will be assessed individually. The core leadership, Lucas, Mother Celeste, the corrupted seers, they'll face the full weight of kingdom law. Execution. For some. For others, the same fate as Mother Celeste, severed from their power, their influence destroyed, living with the knowledge of everything they failed to achieve. His voice held grim satisfaction. I've found that immortality teaches you creative approaches to punishment. Avellini looked at her father, and her heart broke anew. He really thought he was helping us. Good intentions don't absolve terrible choices. But context matters in sentencing. Rowan's hand found her shoulder, the touch grounding. You'll have time to speak with him, to understand his perspective before judgment is passed. That's more grace than he deserves, but you've earned the right to grant it. And my mate bond? It's still there, pulling at me even now. Avellini's voice dropped. I know Lucas manufactured it, but my body doesn't care. How do I live with this? We'll research the severing rituals. It's possible Liona's notes indicated the process existed, though it's dangerous and painful. Or, Rowan hesitated, then continued carefully, you could choose to keep the bond but never acknowledge it. Let it exist without power over you. That's perhaps the truest form of choice, knowing what biology demands and refusing it anyway. The option felt strangely right. Not severing the bond completely, but living with it on her terms. Proving every day that she was stronger than manufactured fate. I choose that, Avellini said. I choose to keep the bond and ignore it. I choose to remember why it exists and never let it control me. Rowan's smile was approving and fierce. Then you've truly fulfilled your prophecy, little wolf. You've ended the reign of forced bonds, at least for yourself. You've begun your own age of choice. Around them, dawn began breaking through the warehouse windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The long night was ending, and with it, 2 centuries of conspiracy. But something else was beginning too. Avellini could feel it in the air, see it in how the collective's true believers looked at her, not as a pawn in their game, but as someone who'd proven choice was possible even when fate said otherwise. What will you do with your choice? Rowan asked quietly. You're still part of my household, if you want. But you could also return to your pack, take a position elsewhere, disappear entirely. For the first time in your life, Avellini, your destiny is actually your own. She considered the options, the sudden vastness of possibility. No prophecy dictating her path. No manufactured bond forcing her direction. No conspiracy pulling her strings. Just choice. Pure, terrifying, exhilarating choice. I want to stay, she decided. Not as a pawn or a weapon or fulfillment of prophecy, but as someone who chooses to help you protect this kingdom from anyone else who thinks they can manipulate wolves' lives. Adrian believed in choice, but he also believed in justice. I can honor both by staying. Then welcome to your new life, Lady Blackthorn. Rowan's formality was undercut by genuine warmth. The kingdom is going to need voices like yours in the coming years. This conspiracy may be ended, but the questions it raised about mate bonds and choice and autonomy, those will echo for generations. Wolves will want change, and they'll deserve it. But actual change, built on truth and justice, not murder and manipulation. The age of choice, Avellini murmured, understanding finally what the prophecy truly meant. Not about destroying your reign, but about evolving it. Giving wolves agency while keeping the stability the kingdom needs. Precisely. And you're going to help me navigate that evolution. He offered his hand, not as a command or manipulation, but as an invitation. Partners in building something better? Avellini took his hand, her grip firm and sure. Partners. As dawn fully broke over the kingdom of Silvercrest, illuminating the captured conspirators and the evidence of their crimes, Avellini Blackthorn stood beside the Eternal Sentinel and felt something she hadn't felt since Adrian's death: hope. The reign of wolves hadn't ended. It had transformed. And the age of choice, real choice, earned through courage and sacrifice and the refusal to be controlled, had truly begun. In his silver chains, Lucas Thornridge watched his manufactured mate stand with the immortal king, and for the first time in his calculated life, he understood that some things couldn't be controlled. Some wolves were simply too strong to be anyone's pawn. And Avellini Blackthorn had always been stronger than anyone realized. Epilogue. 3 months later. The choosing ceremony looked different now. The same grand amphitheater, the same moonlight, the same sacred ritual, but with one crucial addition. For the first time in 3,000 years of wolf history, participants could decline their mate bond. The change had been controversial, requiring months of negotiation between pack alphas, seers, and the royal council. Some traditionalists insisted it would destroy their society. Others argued it was long overdue. The debate raged across the kingdom, fierce and passionate and necessary. But Rowan Nightshade had been unmovable. The conspiracy had proven mate bonds could be manufactured, which meant the system's divine sanctity was already compromised. Giving wolves choice didn't destroy the bonds, it honored them by ensuring they were wanted, chosen, real. Avalini stood beside the throne as she had that first chaotic night, but now she was there by choice, by right, by earned position. Lady Blackthorn, they called her now, the king's advisor on bond reform. The surviving twin who'd ended a conspiracy and begun a revolution. The ceremony proceeded with careful beauty. Mates found each other across the amphitheater, sense and souls recognizing, pulling together. But now, when they met, they had a choice: accept the bond and all it entailed, or acknowledge the recognition, but decline the immediate claim, taking time to know each other first. Most still chose immediate acceptance. The mate bond's pull was powerful, and most wolves wanted what biology offered. But some, particularly she-wolves who'd heard stories of abuse, or wolves who valued autonomy above tradition, chose to wait. To verify compatibility beyond magic before surrendering to destiny. It's working, Rowan observed quietly. The kingdom hasn't collapsed despite the traditionalists' predictions. Change usually works better than resistance to change, Avalini replied. Who knew? His answering smile was becoming increasingly familiar, less the cold expression of an immortal monument and more the genuine amusement of someone remembering how to be alive. Avalini took some pride in that. Marcus Blackthorn had been exiled to the Northern Territories, his title stripped, but his life spared in consideration of his genuine belief he'd been helping his children. Avalini visited him once before he left, seeking not forgiveness, but understanding. I loved you both, her father had said, his voice broken. I made terrible choices trying to protect you, and I'll spend the rest of my life understanding that love without wisdom is just another form of harm. She'd left without reconciliation, but without hatred either. Her father would face his choices' consequences. That was justice. Whether it eventually led to forgiveness was a question for future years. Lucas Thornridge and Mother Celeste faced execution, along with the core conspirators who directly participated in Adrian's murder. Avalini had attended the sentencing, standing silently as judgment was passed. She'd felt the mate bond scream protest as Lucas was led away to his death, her biology unable to accept her mate's destruction. But her will was stronger than her biology. That was the lesson she'd carry forward. Bonds and destiny and fate were powerful, but choice was stronger. Always. Your brother would be proud, Rowan said softly, pulling her from memory. I hope so. Avalini touched the moonstone pendant she now wore openly, the same one that had held Adrian's warning, now repaired and treasured. He started the investigation. I just finished it. You did more than finish his work. You transformed a kingdom. Rowan's voice held warmth and approval and something else that made her breath catch: respect, recognition, perhaps even affection. The Eternal Sentinel has had many advisors over 3 centuries, but very few partners. Thank you for choosing to stand beside me through this. Thank you for believing me when I sat on your lap and made insane accusations. Avalini grinned. That was probably not your finest moment of royal dignity. No, he agreed, his eyes glinting with amusement. But it was certainly my most interesting moment in recent decades. Perhaps longer. Below them, a young she-wolf stood before her mate, considering him carefully. After a long moment, she extended her hand, not in immediate bond acceptance, but in invitation to conversation, to courtship, to choice. The male accepted with visible relief, and together they walked from the amphitheater to begin their relationship on their terms. The age of choice, Avalini murmured, watching them go. Indeed. Rowan's hand found hers, a gesture that had become increasingly natural over the past months. Not romantic, he'd been clear his heart died with his mate 2 centuries ago, but companionable. Trusting. The touch of someone who'd been alone too long and was slowly remembering how to accept partnership. What comes next? She asked. More reform. More debate. More wolves like you choosing to forge their own paths rather than accepting imposed destinies. His thumb traced absent patterns against her hand, a small intimacy that spoke of growing connection. And perhaps, eventually, a kingdom where prophecies aren't feared but welcomed. Because when wolves have genuine choice, destiny becomes collaboration rather than coercion. The ceremony continued into moonrise, beautiful and sacred, and now, finally, just. Avellini stood beside the immortal king and felt her twin's memory settle peacefully in her heart. The bonds are not fate, Adrian had written. They can be manufactured. But they could also be transformed, honored, chosen. And in choosing, truly, freely, completely choosing, perhaps wolves would finally become what they were always meant to be, not slaves to biology or destiny, but architects of their own stories. The reign of wolves hadn't ended. It had simply learned to share power with the wolves it governed. And that, Avellini thought as moonlight painted the amphitheater in silver and promise, was the best kind of revolution, the one that made everyone more free. The end. If you love this story, click on the subscribe button. By clicking on the subscribe button, you ensure you don't miss the next story. That might just be the one you've been waiting to hear.